I can just get started by welcoming everyone. Thank you for joining our session. In this session, we're going to guide you through some reflective exercises that are going to be focused on your self-care, your well-being, and how this care extends to your students primarily and other people in your lives. And we want everyone to participate actively. And so by this, we mean that we want you to engage in the questions and the thought exercises that we're going to ask you. We're not going to put anyone on the spot. It'd be great if you share as much as you're comfortable sharing, but there's no need to actually put on your mics. We will invite you to share your responses by making use of the annotate tool on Zoom, and we're also going to be using Mentimeter. But it's also totally fine if you want to keep your responses to yourself as well. So before I start, one last thing that I will say is that there's 5 of us facilitating this presentation. So myself, Alecia, Emily, Laura, and Justeena, and we all come from Teaching and Learning Research in Action. We're a collective of students, recent students, course instructors, and so we're coming at this from varying perspectives, and hopefully you can take away something from this workshop for yourself as well. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Emily.
Thank you, Alice. So in this new time of uncertainty, isolation, and loss for a lot of people, it's important to recognize and acknowledge the many positives in our lives. So with a small activity, we're asking everyone to describe one thing you're thankful for using 1 to 3 words. You can click the link in the chat and it'll take you to Mentimeter and you can fill it in there. Or if you have a smartphone or a mobile device, anything with a camera, you could scan the QR code on the screen and complete it from there. So some of the answers we're getting, my family's health, my health, those are really good right now. Safe place to live, my job, sunshine, that's especially relevant, in the past week of rain. Pets, my dog, my kids, parents, cats, coffee, my family, family health. So yeah, I think my health is the biggest one here. That's a great thing to be thankful for. So I'll just give everyone a few more seconds to complete this. Colleagues, drive through, me too. Netflix for sure. Vaccine, that's a good one too. My exercise equipment, that's been so hard to get during this time. So that's a great thing to be thankful for. Okay, so thank you everyone for responding. So now we're going to move on to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the activity we just completed kind of ties into the esteem level. So just as a refresher, this hierarchy is a motivational theory in psychology where individuals have to satisfy their most basic needs before progressing to higher levels. So when it comes to taking care of ourselves, we need to make sure we take care of our most basic needs at the bottom before fulfilling our higher order needs. So in the context of COVID-19, these levels can be used in our daily lives. So for example, physiological needs are proper nutrition and sleep habits. safety, developing a daily routine, love and belonging, scheduling virtual calls with distant family members or friends, esteem, the activity we just completed, so writing down one thing you're thankful for, and self actualization, so being productive, reaching goals, and being effective educators as a result of self care. So, in order to do these things, you have to be mindful about them. And I'm going to throw it over to Alice, who's going to talk more in depth about that. So,
Yeah, well, maybe just a refresher about some of these things. I'll move. Yeah, perfect. So, this is just a recap. I don't know how many of us were at the morning session, but, the take home message is when we search the literature on self care and well being, and again on productivity, we know that when we actually take time out to take care of ourselves and we're taking breaks and making sure that we're drinking water, eating when we need to, sleeping properly, and beyond that, all the more higher level needs, when we're meeting all of that, we actually are more productive. We do better quality work. And again, the longevity of our careers increases as well. So overall, it makes sense. Take care of yourself, and you're going to be healthy, happier, and more productive, and in a better position to help others in your life in whatever way you want to, but whatever it is that you want to do. So that's just a recap. And I'll move to the next slide. And again, I'm just going to bring up mindfulness because again, mindfulness, there's so many accolades to mindfulness, and for good reason, right? I mean, the main thing again about mindfulness is that it helps us become aware of what we need to do. What are the needs? What is our body needing right now? And that's where mindfulness comes in. But it's this awareness piece that I think is super important, because I saw with my students as well in their reflective journals, they became aware of things that they were doing, and the kind of things that they needed to do to take care of themselves. And they were becoming aware of what happens when they don't do those things, when they don't hydrate, when they don't eat, when they're not sleeping. They become irritable, they miss out on information, they don't do what they're supposed to do to the best that they can. So mindfulness is a great venue or a great pathway to this awareness that we need to access to be able to take care of ourselves. And so in this session, I'll let the activities roll out, but a lot of it is thinking about how are we going to make sure that we continue to take care of ourselves, like what do we need to do moving forward. And here I'm going to throw it over to Laura, who will bring you through a little exercise.
Hi, everyone. So, right now, we may all feel very motivated to work on and perhaps improve our self care. I'm sure many of us feel empowered whenever we start something new, whether it be a task, hobby, or a project. And it's this motivation that initially drives us to complete these new tasks. But as time goes by, that initial motivation eventually does tend to dwindle, and it leaves us feeling less interested in accomplishing the tasks that we set for ourselves. So, this is why it's important to really set up some plans so that even when our motivation is low, we're still on track to meet our goals. For example, at this moment, we might feel very motivated to wake up extra early in the morning to make sure we go for a walk. But as time passes and our motivation decreases, we may prefer to pass on that walk. But even if we were to form, let's say, a socially distanced walking group or get our housemates to form a walking group, that makes us all accountable to each other. And it's more likely that we'll keep up with the exercise because we have others to answer to. So, as an extension, this graph perfectly represents what motivation tends to look like over a period of time. As you can see, it peaks quite early on and eventually declines as time progresses. But you can also see close to the end that motivation peaks again. This brings us into our next section. How do we set ourselves up to maintain and regain that motivation so that we can pick ourselves up when motivation eventually declines? What can we do to make sure we follow through with the self-care goals we set for ourselves? So for this activity, we want to discuss how we can stay on track with our self-care goals by inviting you to participate in this whiteboard activity. So all you need to do for this is look to the top of your screens where it says View Options. You should see that there's an option on there that says Annotate, and with this, you can anonymously add text underneath each question. So how can we stay on track with our self-care goals? And I'll give you all a minute just to fill in with the annotate function. Set reminders, schedule, checklist, keep a routine, make it a game or competition with friends and family. Yep, I see have a routine again. Rewards, yeah, that's a good one. That keeps me motivated. Make a group so that you can do self-care goals together. Yeah, so to annotate, if you just look at the top of your screen, it'll say view options. You click that and there will be an option that says annotate. Give myself permission to step away and take a walk. Gamification. Chart to track progress. Yep. Remind yourself daily why these self-care goals are important in the first place. Exactly. Yeah, I like that one a lot. Okay, so I think we are starting to slow down. Always think about the end goal and the why. Yeah, that always keeps me motivated as well. Be realistic with your goals. Goals like figure out how to annotate. I think you got it though. Have friends and family push. Walk with someone every day. Yeah, so I'm seeing a trend with like being realistic with goals. Yeah, making your goals public, having a routine and scheduling yourself, having a checklist. Being consistent and having baby steps. Yeah. I think the screen was just cleared. Okay, so then we'll move on to the next section. Again, thank you all for your responses. I'm happy to see all of the great ways we dedicate ourselves to our self-care. Remember, when we take care of ourselves, we're in a much better position to take care of others as well. So this is especially important for educators because us students depend on our educators and course instructors for guidance, knowledge, and direction. And when you take care of yourselves, you're taking care of us as well. When your glass is overflowing, it has the ability to fill others.
So as Laura mentioned in her overflowing glass analogy, when educators are able to take control of their self-care, such as making sure they keep themselves accountable, only then will they be able to support themselves and have the capacity to also care for their students. So as a student who just finished my undergrad, I know how important it is to have educators who care, especially during the pandemic where students are dealing with so many additional challenges. Actually, I find it extremely affirming when I have professors who show they care instead of simply just teaching the course, as it makes me feel as if the instructor will support not only my learning, but also my overall wellness. So with that being said, I would like to lead an activity based on examples of how my professors have shown they cared during the COVID educational context. So in this activity, I will list examples of how my professors have shown they cared, and you will all be able to rate how effective these examples are for instructors to show that they care for their students. So let's get to it. As you can see on the screen, I have 3 different examples of actions that my instructors have taken to show care and promote connection among students. I will give you all ample time to anonymously mark how effective you think these examples are for educators to show they care for students, ranging from extremely not helpful, which is on the left, to extremely helpful, which is on the right of each line. So let me explain how you will mark the screen again, just so everybody's familiar with the annotate function. So if you go to the very top of your Zoom window where you're seeing this presentation, you will see this little black box that says view options. And beside it, there's an arrow that's just pointing downwards. So if you click that arrow now, you should see many options come up. And towards the end of the list, you'll see annotate. So please click that option. And now this time, you'll see the toolbar, and please click the stamp. And you can choose whatever icon you like. There's a check mark, a heart, etc. So you will be able to stamp on the screen with your icon, and your stamp will come up anonymously. So I will now give everybody some time to read the 3 examples and stamp where you think on the line is most appropriate to answer the above question. How effective do you think the following examples are to care for your students? So I will give you some time now just to mark them all, and I'll just give a few seconds to do that. So I see some responses are still coming in, so I'm just going to give another 10 seconds. Okay, great. So if you haven't finished, please feel free to continue as I go along in the examples. So thanks so much for participating. It's interesting to see for the first example, sending empathetic emails to students, that most people stamped at the right side of the line. So they found it extremely helpful to show care. During the pandemic, I received a lot of empathetic emails from instructors. You probably have read or wrote "take care" or "stay safe" in many emails over the past year. Actually, I just received an email from one of my professors saying this, and I quote, "I wish you all the best with the end of the semester. I know this is a very scary time in our world right now, and I hope you are all doing as well as possible. You all helped me create a wonderful class community, and I thank every one of you for that. It was a pleasure being your instructor." So as a student, I found this email extremely thoughtful. It means a lot to me that my professor is cognizant how the lives of students have been disrupted during this time. And to me, it makes me feel as if this professor is approachable and understanding of the challenges students might be facing due to the pandemic. So I personally rate sending empathetic emails as extremely helpful. So we can move on to the second example, which was telling students to reach out if they want to talk, including about topics unrelated to the course. So it seems like most of us marked extremely helpful for this one, but there is some varying opinions as well. So as a recent graduate, I think instructors offering to talk to students during this time about virtually anything is especially helpful. I would consider this one of the most helpful things a course instructor can do, because now more than ever, we're lacking human interaction due to the pandemic, and being behind a computer screen, as we are right now, can make students feel very alone. So I appreciate my professors who explicitly told students, whether over emails or during a Zoom class, that students can reach out to talk to them about anything, including topics beyond the educational context. An instructor explicitly telling me to feel free to reach out tells me as a student that this instructor is here to support me, not only as their student, but just as a person. And that means the world to me during this time. Okay, so we'll move on to my last example, which was having students put their camera on during Zoom lectures to mimic a face-to-face environment. So this example definitely has very opposing opinions. So I think that's very interesting to talk about and discuss. I had a few professors who strongly encouraged cameras to be on during Zoom sessions. And I had one professor who explicitly said that students are more likely to receive full participation marks when your camera is on compared to when it's off during Zoom lectures and breakout rooms. So I personally found this extremely anxiety provoking. Firstly, I live in a house with 4 other family members and a dog that barks often. So I just feel uncomfortable to always have my camera on, as I do not always have access to uninterrupted space. As a student who just completed 3 full year seminar courses, that all required Zoom breakout rooms. I appreciated instructors who understood that not all students have access to or feel comfortable on Zoom and with technology. So it was really nice when instructors gave alternative ways that students could receive participation marks, such as writing in Zoom's chat box or writing a discussion post that could be uploaded to the course website. So for myself, I would mark this example of having students put their camera on during Zoom lectures to mimic a face-to-face environment as extremely not helpful, but that's just my opinion based on my predicament. So I just wanted to thank everyone for completing these examples. And now I'm going to throw it over to Laura, who has some of her very own examples, as she also recently graduated and experienced some of her undergrad courses during the pandemic. So take it away, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Alecia, for your examples. So like Alecia mentioned, I'd like to take a minute and examine 3 of my own examples of student self-care that I experienced throughout online classes. So just like you did on the last slide, please take a moment to indicate how helpful you think each of these actions listed are. So I can see right off the bat, looking at the first one, holding breakout rooms for students to socialize before class, it looks like it is a little bit more on the balance side. So this particular example was actually a lot more helpful for me than I originally anticipated, because I'm sure many of you know how exhausting breakout rooms can sometimes be. But I actually had a professor in one class randomly divide us into breakout rooms at the start of every class for about 10 minutes or so. And it wasn't for class material, but it was just so that we could all talk to each other. And when he first started doing this, I was pretty skeptical as it took some time away from the actual seminar. But over time, with repeated sessions, I found it to be extremely cathartic. And many of us shared other classes with one another, and it was just a good place to vent and talk about everyday life. I even managed to make some good friends through it, so I actually found this extremely helpful. And looking at the having mental health days, it looks like it's more on the extremely helpful side. So in this context, mental health days refers to having a day off from normal class time as scheduled in the syllabus. So for this, I really liked this one. I had an instructor for a year-long course, and she actually scheduled 2 mental health days, one in the fall term and the other in the winter term. And I found them to be immensely helpful. And it's actually staggering to think about how much of a difference one day off class can make, because it gave me the choice to work on other things and actually relax. And just to clarify, it's not just a day off class. There was also no assigned work and nothing was due on these days. So it was just like a total mental health day. And that being said, I'm sure it was also helpful for her and the TA as well, because she always scheduled them during like the busy times of each term when things are typically due all at the same time. Again, going back to that philosophy that taking care of yourself as an educator will help you take care of your students as well. And with this, I found having mental health days to be extremely helpful. So the last one, having a greater number of low weight assignments, I'm actually not surprised that there's some polarizing views on this. I think it's a very personal kind of area to think about. Personally, I did not find this one very helpful because one of my course instructors decided that instead of having 3 or 4 heavily weighted assignments, that she'd assign like numerous lower weighted assignments worth closer to maybe 10 or 15% each. I think the idea was that it would be easier to make up for low marks if someone messed up on an assignment or two. So I think the original intention was good, but personally for myself, I found this one course to be bombarding me with a little bit too much all at once. And like I said, I think this one is a little bit on the personal side, so I'm not surprised that it varies quite a bit. But for me, having a bunch of low weight assignments was more stressful just because it took more of my time. Now, I'm not saying we should have 2 assignments worth 50% each, because I did actually have a class like that in my second year. but I do think there should be a healthy balance between the number of assignments in relation to their weight on final grades. And so for this example, I'd rate it closer to not as helpful. So thank you again, everyone, for participating in mine and Alecia's activity. I'd like to now throw it out to Justeena to lead our discussion.
So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Alecia. Thank you, Emily. I've been reading the chat and there's a lot of great feedback here. Before I pose any sort of discussion questions, I'd like to invite anyone who wants to ask our students anything or bring up or discuss anything that has been said already. Feel free to unmute yourself and have the floor to start our discussion.
Or perhaps if they want to use the chat box too, that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I have a question for the students, if I may.
Of course.
For the students, from the students' perspective, when you have an online class, whether it's HyFlex Now or any other type, what's the best way you think to engage students? How can we get more students to participate?
I can jump in here. Just going off of one of the examples I gave, I just find having an array of options, I think that is going to be the best way to engage students. There were times throughout, just the past semester that I felt some days like I could really participate in a breakout room with other students. Like I would actively talk to them and I felt really good about communicating. And then there was other days that the last thing I wanted to do was be on camera and speak to others. So those were the days that I appreciated alternative options, such as a discussion post that I could complete later in the week, or even like polling options that were just brought about on like synchronous Zoom classes, like something that didn't involve me having to speak on camera or talk. So I think honestly, the answer that I would give is there's many options, and to give them all and let students choose what they feel most comfortable with. Yeah, that would be my response personally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if we have no other questions for now, I'll let you think about it a little bit. I have a question.
I do have a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's regarding the number of assessments and the weighting of assessments.
Mm-hmm.
From speaking with students like over the years, I have found that the vast majority actually prefer lower weighted and having more of them, which I know is not what the panelist has expressed, but what's your opinion?
I would say, I think I understand both the pros and cons to having numerous low weight assessments. Like I mentioned that, if you do badly on one or two assessments, it's easier to make up for it later on. It's just, I think with this particular course, there was just too much all at once. It was like I was doing an assignment for this one class every other week. And then on top of 3 other seminar courses where they were also very assignment heavy, it just got a little bit too much all at once. But I definitely see the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, because what some students have expressed to me in the past is it gets really stressful having to study for assessments worth 25, 30, 35% of their final mark. They prefer, 10, 15, 20 at the most, and having more of them because it reduces the stress level in preparing for them.
Yeah, I can definitely see it in that way too, that even when I was submitting assignments, it's like, okay, even if this didn't work out that much, it's only 10%, I can make up for it later. but then
Right.
it's like in a week from now, I have other stuff to submit for this one class again on top of the other classes. So like, I completely understand why this one would be a little bit more polarizing in terms of students and instructor opinions.
Good, thank you very much.
I see Alice's hand up. I think she wants to comment. Go ahead, Alice.
Sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, Ben, I experienced the same thing. Like previously in my courses, I had not like the midterm test, but like these quizzes, and it was more low stakes, like exactly what you were saying. And my students loved it. They loved it. And I think students like my course because they said it was less stressful. That was years ago. But now heading into the pandemic, what the feedback that my department is getting, I mean, like I should contextualize this by saying when we transitioned over and then, continued delivering remotely, we were told as instructors, break it down, do these low stakes assessments. I was already doing that, but then they kind of advised everyone to do it because not everyone does that. But now we have everyone doing it. And we had a lot in our department, we had a lot of people doing, or a lot of instructors giving 1% assessments. Like, here's a tiny thing. It's only 1% or 2% or 5%. And then the feedback that the head of my department got back, because it's a very small institution, right? So we're very close knit. The feedback that we received is that it's way too much across 5 courses. So I think it's like when you're, back before when we're all doing our own thing before the pandemic, some of us were doing the low stakes things and the students loved it. But then heading now, at my institution, everyone was told to do these low stakes low stakes assessments. And it was not only low stakes, it was like micro, because we're not talking about 10 or 15%, it became like 2%. And I think that overwhelmed the students. I think in my specific context, like I don't teach at Seneca, but in my specific context, I think the students were going crazy because they had all these smaller assignments worth very little, but they were still putting in their 100%. Because students, like what I find about students is everybody wants to do well. Everybody wants to get 100. Everyone is trying their best, like most students. And so they were just exhausted by putting their all into these assessments that, at the end of the day counted for like 2%. So sorry, that was just my 2 cents with that.
I can actually also echo what Alice said. I taught stats at York for 2 years in a row. And at the time, what I did is I had a flipped classroom set up. And so a lot of the activities and a lot of the marks they get would be in class during that class time, in like small quizzes, participation, and so on. And students did love it, not only because they didn't have to do much in terms of assessments after hours, but they actually, by coming to class and by engaging in the class, they would be able to accumulate marks in terms of low assessments. Then after the transition, I can see that similar to what Alice has said, if you have a small quiz, 10-question quiz, for example, set up every week for 5 classes, full course load, that's 5 quizzes that you didn't have before that you can kind of prioritize as a student, prioritize, okay, this week I have a midterm, I need to focus on that and maybe focus less on my other classes and sort of work your time in that sense. So it becomes more like cognitive overload when you have all of these sort of smaller tasks to do, especially asynchronously. I know Alecia said to encourage participation, asynchronous participation is best, to give people the opportunity to participate and so on, especially in these circumstances. So from in my humble opinion, there's a balance. There's a balance between the weightings. There's a balance between the frequency. There's a balance between the synchronous stuff and the asynchronous stuff. Not everything has to be asynchronous. Not everything has to be synchronous. And so we kind of have to maybe piecemeal it such that our plate has, veggies, has carbs, and has some protein for everybody. So that's my opinion. I see here some great comments in the chat. Costa says, sometimes even 1.5 weeks. I tell them, I know it isn't due for a while, but I'll introduce the assignment and get the ball rolling on it if you can or want to get started on it little by little. So that's great. We have here, Yvonne said, yes, I could see that students would forget smaller discussions due to being overloaded with larger assignments across their courses. I'd actually like to pose a question to everybody to reflect on or potentially answer. Do you think that the institution or the program or the instructor has the responsibility to teach self-care to students? Feel free to unmute, raise your hand, or just respond in the chat. Which body do you think would be responsible to teach self-care to students? And is that important from an important skill for them to learn from their sort of degree? All? I see Scott saying all.
If I can just jump on Mike for a second, I do believe it has to be at all levels, because
absolutely
within a program, I teach in engineering, and the self-care that we might be providing to students might be a little bit off target. And if they're going to be participating in other professional options or other general education subjects, I think it has to be across the entire institution so that they can see that it's not just a couple people that are promoting it. It's much more far-reaching than just a special interest of mine, but it's institution-wide.
Okay, I see Yvonne has her hand raised. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Hi, yeah, I just want to say, first of all, that's an excellent question. I know for my program, so I teach in therapeutic recreation. So we are a very, hands-on caring profession. And so same type of model that you're saying now, if we don't teach our students how to take care of themselves, how can we expect them to take care of other people when they graduate? So, especially with the pandemic, I've started off all my classes with just a weekly check-in, a daily check-in, just with, the emojis, similar to what Alice did earlier today. But, just to give them that, 5-10 seconds a day to just focus on how they're feeling, and then kind of move on from there. And I encourage things like journaling, and, within our practice, we have a lot of self-reflection as well.
That's great. Anyone else have any other examples? Oh, wow, the hands have gone up. Tim, go ahead and unmute yourself.
The thing I encourage them to do a lot is to get some sleep. They think they don't have time for sleep, but the research says the reason they don't have time is because they don't get enough sleep. The research all says with college students that if they get regular sleep, their marks will be better by up to a half a GPA. Yeah. And it's just emphasizing that message over and over again increases their productivity. They're just better overall. It's the one thing they can do that doesn't involve extra activity. It's just, and yeah, you're right. You guys are right. We have to treat the whole student, teach the whole student.
That's very important. Diane, go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Diane and I teach with the nursing program. I'm also an emergency nurse myself. And so it's been a little bit chaotic and heartbreaking over the last year with my job. But the one thing that I do, especially with the students, is to try and incorporate self-care and at least like weekly lectures for them, because not only are half my students, parents that take care of their kids at home, and then you have a profession that you go in and you take care of complete strangers, right? It's huge for burnout. So same thing as everyone else was saying as well, but I do try and bring it in. I try and do weekly checks to see how they're feeling. I let them know that they can come and talk, and it is just the basics. So I really love what Alice had put up before with everyone seems to go for these big goals of, meditate every day and run your 10 kilometers and eat healthy and lose weight. And it does get overwhelming, but even just the small parts of self-care of just having your morning coffee for 5 minutes alone in silence, whether you have to wake up early, opening the blinds in the morning, making your bed, I think it's really important, especially right now with all the pressures, that you do just focus on those small things. And I also offer encouragement to them, right? Make sure you get your sleep, even just go for a walk. It doesn't have to be the gym. It doesn't have to be exercise, get some fresh air and try and eat properly. And I think even if we just stick to the small things, it doesn't get as overwhelming for them. But I absolutely think everyone needs to help to support the students with everything that they're going through.
Yeah. And actually, what I can see as a sort of consensus is when you have the instructor, as everyone has sort of expressed, when the instructor values self-care, when the instructor has weight, puts weight on how important self-care is for themselves, then it just sort of automatically seeps into their teaching practices, right? And so kind of getting things in order yourself and working on your ability and your commitment to self-care will then translate into the curriculum, will translate into the teaching practices, will translate and sort of transfer to your students as well. And that's one way model self-care and teach their students in that way. I know we talked about the institution as well. We also talked about, the department as well, all of these roles. However, the instructor is the role model and has the close one-to-one contact with students. And so I want to thank everybody for their participation. And I appreciate all of the contributions from students and from the instructors.